For many retirees, pets aren't just animals. They are beloved members of the family. But what happens to your pet if something unexpected happens to you? As you're building or updating your estate plan, it's worth asking whether your furry, feathered, or four-legged companions should be a part of the conversation. In today's episode, we'll unpack 5 key considerations to help you decide if and how you should include your pets in your estate plan. So Spencer, today we get to talk about how do you deal with an estate plan if you've got pets that are considerations. So we got 5 things that we want to talk through. First is the reality that pets are legally considered property, not people. Why is this important?
Well, without planning, pets can be treated as assets to be distributed. So there's not a provision within law where the court is going to look at things and try to interpret what's going to be in the pet's best interest. They're property under law. So they're not like children where there are going to be deeper levels of consideration, even if the children are not listed in the will, even if there's not a guardian listed in the will. So the court can't interpret some kind of intent there or what would be in the best interest. So there's, if there's a lack of direction and say you haven't had this conversation with family members or friends or loved ones, then it's kind of a difficult thing because some pets require more care, more attention than others. I just think even in my own life about the 2 dogs that we've owned since we've been married, Emily and I. First dog, Jester, a beloved black lab, very, very low maintenance. He's a dog, and so he's got to be let out. He's got to be cared for and such. But just about any family that likes a dog could take Jester in and be delighted with Jester, probably. I mean, he is a mid-sized dog. Our current dog, though, Lucy, is a handful. She's part German Shepherd. She has a ton of energy. She's only about 2 right now. And so there would have to be a special family, really, to be able to take her in and want to take her on, much more so than Jester, that would kind of be that way for anyone. Now, of course, my daughters in particular, and my wife especially, just absolutely love Lucy. And my sons and I, we enjoy Lucy and we take care of her and such. But if something should happen to us, we'd want to make sure that Lucy would be well taken care of and that we'd actually have had a conversation with someone of like, okay, where does Lucy actually go? Because it's not going to be to my parents or her parents who would not be able to really handle Lucy. But, she has a sister that would certainly be open, I think, to taking Lucy. So for all of us, we have different considerations, and some of that really has to do with what does the pet need?
Right. So I think that really dovetails well into that second key point. Just the idea of naming a pet caregiver ensures continuity of care. Because if Lucy were to go to your parents, knowing both Lucy and your parents, there would be a little bit of a mess going on. So what are some really key considerations as we think about naming that caregiver?
Well, the biggest thing is that you've just thought about it and that you've conveyed it to people. So when you actually have that conversation with people, you might be surprised that someone is much more willing or less willing to take your pet than you might have anticipated. So I think both of Emily's sisters would be interested in taking care of Lucy should something happen to our family. Whereas if I had the conversation with my parents, again, I think that would be a different conversation. And some of it is because she just acts kind of crazy around my parents, more so than other people that come and see her for whatever reason. So it's an interesting dynamic there, but actually having had the conversation, we know that there are landing points, for her. You might assume that someone would be willing to take care of your beloved cat or your docile dog, but they may have other things going on in life that makes it more difficult if they travel a lot, for instance, or other things. So actually having the conversation, thinking about it, and then having the conversation, and then putting that into writing can be a helpful process there.
Well, and we're talking about dogs and cats right now because those are the most common animals. But obviously, if you have horses or larger animals, this is going to be a much more intricate conversation that you need to have. And we'll come back to this in the future. But let's go ahead and talk about our third key point. Creating a pet trust offers financial support for long-term care. Talk us through that piece.
Well, pets are not free. And it feels like more and more so, they're not free because the level of care that we're providing medically, the kinds of foods that are offered now to pets, there's a level of expense that's higher than maybe it was 20 years ago for your average pet. Again, I haven't seen the numbers there, but that's anecdotally with our clients and with us personally, I would say that. So making sure that if you really care for your animal, that you would pass along some resources can be a very helpful step. Now, you can go on the spectrum here from very, very detailed and intricate in something like a trust, which we'll talk about in a moment. Or you may say, okay, if I have a very high likelihood, a very high level of confidence that one particular person is going to take, Lucy in our circumstances, then maybe making a gift to them in the will, or a bequest that would be, a modest bequest might be, enough there. And so let's just say that you think your dog's going to live another 10 years and you think that $2,000 a year would be a good amount to pass along. Why maybe passing along $20,000 in your will, might be something that would be reasonable if you want to help, in the care of this animal. If you do that, though, you name someone, they're not, under most circumstances, again, it's our understanding that they are not going to be required legally to take care of that pet. If you just give them a bequest, say of $20,000, you say, okay, I want my sister-in-law to receive $20,000 to care for, Lucy. She's going to receive the $20,000, but whatever she does with Lucy is not going to be, her feet are not going to be held to the fire there. Now, for us, again, that's not a consideration because we know that either one of the sisters that my wife has would do a great job, taking care of really any animal. But for folks who have some questions about that, then setting up a pet trust would be one where you actually put funds there, you name a trustee who administers the trust. You put in language surrounding the care of your animal and different things that you want to see happen. So if you want, semi-annual medical visits, or you want a particular type of food or whatever it might be, then the trustee can actually dole out funds provided that they go in that direction. So if you wanted the most level of oversight, you would have a trustee who would be the one who would be administering that pet trust, enforcing those terms, making sure that the caregiver actually was doing those things. Now, typically, again, you're going to have a high level of trust in the caregiver, and so that person might be the same person. Or you might, again, just make that bequest there. So there's a lot of different ways you can go. A pet trust, of course, there's going to be a level of complexity that you're going to introduce here. So beware on that. But if you did have a more complex situation, like you had a beloved horse that you thought might live another 10, 15 years, and there were some key things that you wanted to make sure maybe that the caregiver or the stable, the community was offering, then maybe you set up a pet trust and have a trustee, that's being able to oversee and manage those pieces. Of course, once you do that, you have a trust, and there's a trust tax document that must be filed, and there's all kinds of other, pieces to that. So you are introducing complexity. You're introducing probably a higher level of cost, and actually administering the trust and all those kinds of things. So you do want to be aware. You want to make sure that it's actually going to enhance your pet's life and be able to protect them in particular ways that you think are important before you would go down that path. But that does give the most control for you to speak beyond the grave, to make sure that the pet is cared for with funds in particular ways, again, that you could specify in a trust document.
Right. So we've touched on this a few times, but the reality is certain breeds and certain species require special planning. Again, horses, some pets that may outlive you, maybe even outlive your heirs, thinking like macaws or tortoises. So what are some of these special considerations that we need for maybe more needy pets?
Well, if their care is required in a different level or a higher level, then really you need to have a conversation with who will take care of your pet going forward. Oftentimes it might be some kind of conservatory or other kind of farm that would be set up to be able to care specifically for these types of animals. If that is the case, then they may have their own provisions to say, okay, well, we will be delighted to care for your pet, but we also require that you provide some funds, for us for the future, or strongly suggest that. So those are things that you would want to know up front, because you really don't, if you have the pet tortoise that may outlive even your heirs, you don't want your heirs to try to figure out, okay, how do I actually take care of this tortoise or pass this tortoise along to some kind of conservatory or whatever it might be. So you want to have done all of the legwork up front to make that very easy for your executor or executrix, because you pass away and you don't have all of those pieces in place. Well, now there's a much higher likelihood that your beloved pet is not going to be cared for.
Right. The last piece here, including your pets in your estate plan, really reflects your broader legacy, those things that you desire. So talk us through this piece.
Well, one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your heirs is a level of emotional security, clarity of your intent. They're going to be grieving your loss. So making sure that you've had the conversations and that they know with crystal clarity what your intent is with your assets, with your pets, with everything kind of in your life that you've stewarded, will help them to be able to focus on grieving and not just all of the details of the minutia that you didn't think through. So, if you have a house full of stuff and have not told anyone what's going to anyone, and people have to sort through that, that can take a tremendous amount of time. Similarly, if you have a pet or several pets that you've not said, this one's going here, this one's going here, here's the funds for that, it can be emotionally draining because sometimes there's not an easy solution. Again, with certain breeds of dog, even if you have, a dog that has a level of aggression towards some people, that can be really difficult to find a good placement unless you've done that on the front end.
Right. Well, Spencer, thanks for walking us through this idea of how do we think about and make provisions for our pets in our estate plan. Clients, if you have questions about this and want to talk about how do you do that, how do you consider the next generation for who cares for your pets, we would love to have that conversation with you. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you again next time. Take care. If you like these financial planning videos, please share with a friend, and if you have questions, go to our website at seriousretirement.com. This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We are located in Knoxville, Tennessee. You can visit our website at seriousretirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only, and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents. Advisory services offered through Retirement Planning Services, LLC.